He is our neighbor. He is an educator, poet, a naturalist. And I think Jack was one of those people who actually justly deserves that distinction. These are not things that Jack does. These are things that Jack is to us. I think the greatest compliment I can think of to give to Jack came to me many years ago from a fellow student. When I first started teaching here at Holton over 20 years ago, I had this wonderful young man in class, very bright, lover of learning, a local, one of my neighbors from Fillmore, and loved poetry, loved the outdoors. Just a wonderful, early in my career, student who made me realize this was a great place to be, to live, to teach. And one day, after class, we were enjoying a conversation, and Jack came up in the conversation, and the student sort of knocked me over with, "Oh, you mean Uncle Jack?" Which is not something I had called him up to that point. Nor have I since, nor will I. But Jack had mentored this young man since he was a small boy, really, because he was his neighbor. And he had become a lover of literature and of nature.
Right.
And of his nature, and of his neighbor, like Jack. And so, I ask you to join me in welcoming to the podium to read from
Uncle Jack.
The Avuncular, Jack Lex.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank all of you for coming out. Thank you, Susan, for all of this, for the arrangements, and for your neighborliness as well. It's hard to put together a reading for a single book because books are arranged differently than readings. But I'm going to venture tonight to basically read through the book. Not all of it. Maybe you wouldn't like it. But excerpts from it in the order that they appear in the book. And so I'm going to make very few comments during the reading about the poems. Just when there is a transition between sections, I will make some comments. The book has a kind of parentheses to it. So I'm going to begin the reading with the first poem and the last poem. And when you hear the last poem, you know why I don't want to end the reading yet. It is the poem that I, in fact, ended my retirement reading with, and you can understand what you'll see. The opening poem is called Consider from a Certain Aspect. And it is a kind of direction, perhaps, on how to read the book. That's an epigraph from Jack1. Each kind of being is in its own way, is good in its own way, is beautiful in its own way. Consider it from a certain aspect. The beaver, rippling the still pond of its own making, its small paws feeding the thin branches into its nibbling teeth, is, in its own way, good and beautiful. The old, one-eyed man, not striding, ambling, stopping and starting on the path, as his vision beholds and holds him, moved and motionless. What has he abandoned to be what he, in his own way, will He is himself, in his own way, this moment, good and beautiful. Washed by the rich, red-brown dough, still on the path between the fringe of cottonwoods lining the creek like words, and the knee-high corn that is, in its own way, like the dough. And the last poem of the book is the title poem, Reckless Freedom. Master of ceremony. This is a good poem thinking about tomorrow, where I will be. Master of ceremony, I led the procession of scholars in my long robe. What a joke. My only virtue, not dying. I'll soon fix that. Today, however, I'll haul firewood, climb Flat Mountain, leap down slope like a goat. The book has poems from 20 years' time. The first section is called Writing Home, and the poems in it were written between 1990 and 2002. The poems in this section of the book share the most with the poems from my earlier books. They share the aesthetic. They are autobiographical. They are, to the best of my knowledge, factual. Though people in my family will suggest the facts are different, but what they know. And I have tried in these poems to be actually true and true, and to represent how things are. I started writing poetry in the late 50s, early 60s, in high school and college, and the mode that was most popular at that time was a kind of confessional mode. And these poems, in a sense, could come out of that, although they're not as sensational as much as the poems from that era. But they have that element. They try to be direct and factually true. So if it happens in the poem, it did happen. So I'm going to read 3 poems from this section. The first is called Homecoming. In the beginning, there was war. And my father, hardly more than a boy, was called. Because he had no church to witness to the peaceful heart that spoke a living word within his chest, he went. And he became a silent man. In the chasm of his obedience, I fell, plunged with my first steps into the wash of blood. A slash of milky glass split my face from nose to cheek and left me just one eye to watch for his return. My mother wept, I'm sure. No one told my father. He soldiered on in ignorance of the night already settling on his day. His oldest brother fell at Normandy, and though he rose to thump impatiently on one good leg, on one good stomach. My father had no hour to take such news to heart. Under orders, he drove forward, sometimes horsing an ammo truck, sometimes a general's jeep. He posed for photographs and sent them like postcards to his wife and lover, joked, having a wonderful time. Then, one April Sabbath in 1945, his Easter prayers still moist upon his lips, he drove into a tomb empty of all purpose. 30,000 creeping skeletons, inhuman, masked like insects behind a fence, 9,000 $9,000